What's up, Bills Mafia? Fernando Schmude here, and that's your leading the charge today to do the preview about the Bills versus Commanders Week 3 matchup. The Bills playing away from home to face the 2-0 Washington Commanders. Great start for the young team, or the young quarterback team at least. And we're gonna talk about this matchup today. And what to expect from this big time game week 3, and how can the Bills explore this Commanders team trying to win the second game in a row and go to week 4 in a good situation, facing or in a decent situation, facing the Miami Dolphins, trying to beat the rival, the divisional rival, and get to the top of the standings in the AFC East. Bills Mafia, feel free to comment via comment section here, via chat. If you're watching in another moment, comment in the comment sections, YouTube comment sections. Remembering this episode is also available in your favorite podcast aggregator, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those podcast aggregators. We have the Leading the Charge available there. Thank you so much for listening and for participating. Feel free to participate in the chat. Also, Flavio is already in the chat sending a go Bill. So feel free to opine, to tell me, let me know what's your expectations what are your expectations for this game against the Commanders, and which matchup maybe worries you when facing this Commander team. What really scares you a little bit, and where do you feel confident about this Bills facing this Washington team in the week 3? So without further ado, let's start talking Bills news this week. We've learned that Christian Kirksey is retiring, right? He let the team know that that he's retiring ahead of this week 3. And that's a little bit concerning that Kirksey is retiring, because I believe most of us, we aren't sure about the coaching staff, but Christian Kirksey was brought in for a reason, and with his experience, with his leadership, he's a proven option at the middle linebacker spot, where all the options that we had previously there started to fail in their chances. Like Dodson wasn't good during the preseason. Spector started contending, but couldn't really become a factor in this competition. And Terrell Bernard was in the competitions, but got injured. So AJ Klein, experienced guy, but again, not the answer at the position, athletically speaking. And so with everybody failing in some sort of situation, everybody minus Terrell Bernard, maybe, right? Terrell Bernard is our only hope and our only option now, especially because Dorian Williams hasn't been prepared for the position to play the Mike linebacker spot, and he's being strictly a special teams player. He's being strictly prepared as Milano's backup. He even got some snaps last game, and alongside Dodson at the end of the game. But again, even with few snaps, Dodson didn't really play well, and even Pro Football Focus, who I can't take their grades for granted. I can't take their grades like the law or something that I can't contest. But it's good to have an idea, to have at least a different point of view when evaluating players, and even with very few snaps, Dodson wasn't graded well in this game. So right now, as the Bills are constructed right now, our options are Terrell Bernard and Terrell Bernard. We don't have really any other option. AJ Klein was brought back into the practice squad. He has the experience. He can maybe fill in for a little, but we can't really trust having AJ Klein out there for long periods. Dodson's probably still ahead of him. Obviously, he's in the roster still. And But I think all of us can agree that it was way more comfortable having in the back of our minds that Christian Kirksey was learning the defense. Christian Kirksey was ready to come in and do a decent job if Bernard couldn't really play well. The good news are Terrell Bernard has played well through 2 weeks, right? And I'm really happy about that. You know that because I've been really high on Terrell Bernard since the beginning. And despite some people really criticizing his week 1 performance, I felt like he did really well in week 1. Like I felt like he was poised, he was composed, he had the command of this defense, he could communicate, he could be on the right place on the right time most of the time. Obviously, he struggles with dealing with guards, dealing with tackles, those big offensive linemen when they can put their hands on Bernard, he will struggle a little bit, but he can avoid some of those blockers and do a decent job. He's also, I don't see Bernard as a shirt tackler like Dorian. I can see Dorian Williams in his young career being. Dorian has longer arms, and it seems like when Dorian rubs up somebody, it's done. I don't feel the same way about Bernard. Sometimes he's the first one to arrive in the play, and he can make the first tackle, but it's not always enough. You need more people arriving too to help him. Sometimes he's the guy arriving and helping other people to not miss tackles. But I feel good about Bernard so far. I think he even felt more comfortable in the second game against the the Raiders last week, and we saw a huge performance from our defense against the Raiders, especially against the run, where we question how much the lack of size by Ed Oliver, by Bernard, Milan was already there, Teron Johnson was already there. So how much this lack of size in your front seven can really hurt this Bills defense going forward. So the early returns have been good. I think they did an awesome job against a tough opponent against the Raiders. Jacobs is no slouch. He's a big time runner. He no wonder he already won the rushing title. So it's not always easy to deal with a guy like that. And the Bills defense showed that they can, if they are in right positions, attacking the right gaps, not missing tackles, or being really quick to help other tacklers to not miss those tackles. They can gang tackle people and stop plays and avoid big run games by opponents. But and obviously with Bernardo there against the pass, it's an advantage to have this kind of guy who's quick, twitchy, interchangeable with Milano. As I always say here, he can blitz, he can cover, he has good awareness in the middle of the field. Like he knows where to be, he knows how to cut in front of those crossers against crossing routes, how to pass those crossers to the next guy and still cover his zone in the middle of the field. So I really like how Bernard has played. That's the great news, and that's why maybe it's not that concerning that that Kirksey is gone. On the other hand, we've talked about how Bernard sometimes has struggled to stay healthy. He's a smaller guy for the position. He's dealing with a lot of traffic in front of him. He's dealing with a lot of big guys in front of him. And he already got injured during preseason. That's the reason he didn't have the chance to play during preseason and compete. And again, he's a little bit nicked up again. As I can show you here, the Bills injury report for yesterday, Terrell Bernard with a knee injury and quadriceps injury. He was limited on Wednesday, limited yesterday. Sean McDermott said today that everybody's going to practice today. Those are big news via Saul Capaccio. Thanks so much, Saul, for a great job. And McDermott himself said, look, everybody's going to practice today at some capacity. So I believe Bernard will practice. Not sure if he will still be limited today, but he should play. And hopefully he can stay healthy and keep playing well, keep getting better. I think he can really hold down that middle linebacker spot. And in my opinion, that's the type of guy that going forward, if we think a life post Micah Hyde, post Jordan Poyer, that's something we can really question down the road going into 2024, 2025. I really believe Bernard can become a team captain, a defensive captain in this team. The position is about that, and we can see that despite not being the most vocal guy, at least to the media or to the fans, he's a guy who seems an easygoing guy, a quiet guy, but on the field he communicates a lot. All the scouting reports, all the interviews about from Leslie Fraser, from McDermott, people always raves about his leadership skills. So I believe he can be a team captain going forward. I think it's natural actually to him to become this team captain. All he gotta do is continue to get better, continue to play well, and stay healthy. Spencer Brown also was limited. James Cook, personal reasons, didn't practice. His daughter, I believe, was born this week. So shout out to James Cook and his family. God bless his family, his newborn daughter. Leonard Floyd, Cook is back practicing. Okay, guys, he will be on the field today, this Friday. Floyd with an ankle was limited on Thursday, should practice today. Those are guys that really don't need to practice a lot. They can be ready for the game. They gotta be healthy. That's the most important thing. Micah Hyde was listed with a hamstring. Even some people questioning me after the game, saying in my previous lead in the charge in Portuguese, saying, "Oh, Micah Hyde, I believe it was an ankle." No, I felt like it was a muscular issue. The way he argued about it to the trainer, and it's a hamstring. So that's something to keep an eye on because, man, I really don't like forcing muscular issues, and a hamstring issue for a guy who has been challenged in his speed department. He got to run at his full strength. He got to run at 100%. So it's tough for a guy like a Mike Hyde to have a problem, a hamstring problem. I hope he can be ready to play and can play really well without no problems. But this injury in particular is something to keep an eye on, in my opinion. Then Dawson Knox 2 days without practicing due to a back injury, a back problem. McDermott said he will be practicing today. I don't know how much he'll be practicing, but the good news here is obviously if Dawson can't go, we'll see more snaps, even more snaps for Kincaid, who has had a lot of snaps. He's been the slot wide receiver mostly. The Bills have used a lot of 12 personnel, a lot of Kincaid and Knox on the field. I hope Knox can go. He's important. The Bills, if he can't go, I can anticipate Quentin Morris playing a lot in this game because I don't see the Bills coming away from their 12 personnel and the usage, how they like to use this personnel, how this has helped the team to run the ball. They didn't use 12 personnel as much in week 2 as they did in week 1, but I believe that's because they tried to pass a little bit more early on against the Raiders, and we could see in the second half they're using a lot of 12 personnel because that's where the Bills already had the lead and they wanted to run the ball and milk the clock. So again, away from home, the weather might be bad. That's a place where the Bills might want to run the ball a lot, and away from home, a strong defensive unit. So the run game will be important in this game, and having Dawson Knox makes our 12 personnel way better than having this 12 personnel on the field with Quentin Morris. So I hope he can go, and even if he only plays a complementary role and Kincaid has the majority of snaps. Jordan Phillips already full participant yesterday. Jordan Poyer had a vet rest day, so he'll be fine. This is the Bills injury report for this week. We should have another one today, but McDermott already said everybody's going to play at some capacity. It's going to practice at some capacity, so that's something that we can be happy about. I think the Bills are pretty healthy going into week 3. If you remember last season, going into week 3 against the Dolphins, we had already missed Micah Hyde for the season. We had some knocks, some guys not playing. So it's good to have the squad as healthy as they are right now going into week 3. So, John Roberts says here, oh, I would like Cook to do great again. Me too, John. No doubt we need Cook doing great again. Not just him, but also Latavius Murray, man. It's another important game, and that's great to have Latavius Murray. That's great to have Damian Harris. This three-headed backfield has been great for these Bills. Uh, these Washington Commanders teams, they have a tough defensive line. They'll be tough to run against. They are a very aggressive defensive unit. Jack Del Rio, the former Jaguars head coach, their defensive coordinator, is an aggressive guy. He likes to send blitzes. He likes to run blitz. So, and that's a defensive line that, in my opinion, has an advantage against our offensive line. Uh, Maybe most of the defensive lines have this advantage against our offensive line, but I think our offensive line has gotten better. I think against the Jets, it was obviously a mismatch. Uh, but against the Raiders, I felt they had a good matchup. Other than Crosby, I didn't feel like they had a handful dealing with that offensive line, and we could see it. It was shown in the previous game. Uh, we could use our running backs and our tight ends to help Spencer Brown dealing with Crosby, and the rest of the offensive line really could deal with their matchups and could do their jobs and protect Josh, have a good pocket made for Josh, and even establish a new line of scrimmage and run the ball. And that helped the Bills a lot in that game, in the way the Bills could win that game without major problems. Against the Commanders, I see a tougher challenge against this D line. Let me throw this defensive side of the this defensive side of the ball, the defensive unit from the Commanders on the screen. So they have a tough defensive line. Montez Sweat already has 3 sacks this season. Chase Young is back and he has less sacks than Sweat, but he's a beast, man. He's dangerous. He's going to face Dion Dawkins a lot. Dawkins has played great this season so far, but that's a big challenge. He hasn't had a challenge as tough as Chase Young so far, and that's a matchup to keep an eye on. I want to check a lot if Dion Dawkins will be able by himself to keep Chase Young in check and not wrecking havoc on this offensive in our offensive backfield. Montez Sweat against Spencer Brown is a problem. It's not the biggest problem than Crosby was, but we need to keep an eye on, help Spencer Brown there. Spencer Brown also had a good game against the Raiders. It wasn't just help. He did his job. He did a nice job dealing with Sweat. Sweat is a speed rusher. He can sometimes translate that speed to power. So that's where Spencer Brown has struggled the most with the bull rushes. I hope he can keep playing well, show people that he can stop those bull rushes. Otherwise, people will attack him a lot that way. And Sweat will certainly test Spencer Brown a lot in that department. But also inside, Jonathan Allen and Darren Payne, that's a big time defensive tackle duo, man. They have the size, they have the power, they have the production to stop the run, to rush the passer from inside. So the Bills offensive line will have a handful with this unit. And that's the biggest matchup, in my opinion, to the Bills to be able to establish a good rhythm offensively. Because as we seen last week, this Bills offense can be multi-dimensional. They can be dangerous passing the ball, but also they can run the ball efficiently. And I hope they can continue to do so Osiris Torrance has had a great start of his career. He has played great so far. I'm really excited to see Torrance continuing to develop, continuing to get better. And that's another tough challenge against Jonathan Allen, against their own Payne. So, same way with McGovern, an athletic guy, a guy who can move, who can be a puller. The Bills has used more power run game, more gap schemes, and that's important to have McGovern and Mitch Morse in this situation because those guys are more mobile than Torrance. They can pull, they can lead runs, and they're gonna have a tough challenge against this defensive line units, no doubt about that. And I really hope they can hold their own and do a nice job, and the Bills can have a run game because when you put Josh in a unidimensional situation where he gotta throw all the time and he gotta even be the run game himself, that's not ideal for what we want the Bills the offense looking like. That's far from ideal actually, and that's where he starts to tend to play more hero ball, tends to try more to be Superman, and sometimes it's not needed. So I hope the Bills can continue to establish the run game. They can use, especially early, I believe it's important to use Damian Harris, to use Latavius Murray to run in between the tackles, because as the game goes on and maybe the defensive tackle rotation starts to get a little bit gassed, I can see James Cook breaking some of those long runs. But initially, it's good to have those hammers, the Latavius Murray hammer, the Damian Harris hammer, like pounding the rock and tearing that defensive line down and trying to gas them a little bit. So that's where I believe the Bills should attack this defensive line rotation and this defensive line group. That's a tough matchup, and I hope they can really implement a good physical run game, especially with Latavius Murray and Damian Harris, so James Cook can be great again, as John said, in the passing game, in the running game, overall. But taking maybe a lighter load and an easier way, dealing with guys a little bit more gas. Not that he shouldn't play, obviously, early, but I try to ham with Latavius Murray a little bit more early on. John also said about AJ Klein taking Kirksey's place, right? Yes, no doubt. He's already in the practice squad, and that's our plan B now. I think Klein always been the last line of defense at middle linebacker, the floor established by McDermott. But I really hope they start to prepare Dorian for the position, because in case Bernard, I don't believe he will struggle, he will do badly. I think he can just get better with more experience. But in case you need somebody, in case Bernard gets nickeled up or gotta lose some playing time because of injury, Dorian must be ready there, because I'm not so confident on Dodson anymore. He hasn't shown much. Guga is talking here. What do you think about our next game matchup against our heavy, strong, physical DL? What I just told here. Thanks for participating, Guga. John reminding you, people, please hit that like button, share, subscribe to Buffalo Rumblings channel, subscribe to my own Fernando Schmude channel, and I really appreciate you taking your time to watch, to listen, and especially hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Yes, John reminded it correctly. Tre'Davious White will have a rest day today, a vet rest day, but everyone is going to be practicing at some capacity. We don't know who are going to be limited or not, but Tre'Davious White's not practicing today, but not due to an injury, just a vet rest day. He'll be ready for the game, and that's important. Still talking about the Commanders' defense. If that defensive line is really strong, and they really are, okay, I won't say the rest of the group isn't, but it's not as strong as the defensive line. That's a defensive line-led group. The linebacker group, in my opinion, isn't really impressive. Even Jack Del Rio himself, the defensive coordinator, has called out Jamin Davis about his playing level. So he wants better from Jamin Davis, and that's a group that has the physicality, has the athleticism, him and Cody Barton, but it's not really a playmaking group of linebackers. They can deal, especially against the run, but I don't see them as big time coverage linebackers. That's something that might be explored with Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, if healthy, and even with Stephon Diggs on the slot for some time. We've seen this in both first week two, same thing. And then the secondary. The secondary has talent. They have Kendall Fuller, who's been a nice, solid cornerback for quite some time now. The former first-round pick, Emmanuel Forbes, that's their number one cornerback. He's probably not following Diggs inside if Diggs go there. But anyway, even if they are good players, neither of them are really elite players so far. Those are guys that I'm confident Stephon Diggs is going to win his matchups against Forbes more often than not. I can tell you the same thing about Gabriel Davis and Kendall Fuller, despite Gabe Davis being a different kind of wide receiver, and we know that's his go-to move, or he's better used in his middle, intermediate, and deep route. So I don't expect Gabe Davis being used differently than we've used to see him being used so far, like here and there, maybe in a short crossing routes, but most of the time threatening the defenses deep, using this deep threat to run those curl runs, run those comeback routes, and show the numbers to Josh Allen so Josh can hit him on the sideline, especially. That's where Gabe Davis is really dominant, where he succeeds, and I really believe he can be a nightmare for Kendall Fuller, threatening him downfield and then punishing the defense with those callback and curl routes. Benjamin St-Juste, that's a physical nickel cornerback, a really good one, a one that can help against the run, just like Teron Johnson does for the Bills, and he's on the field a lot of the time. So the Bills might try to put size on him with Kincaid. It will depend on Knox's availability, obviously, to be able to use Kincaid in the slot again and with his size. But there have been rumblings about how Deontay Hardy has practiced well this week and how he has made some nice plays during this week. He was used a lot in week one, mainly in that old Isaiah McKenzie role where he was used more for some jet motion, some reverses, some screen passes, and not really like a full-time wide receiver. In week two, we didn't see the Bills using Hardy as much in this department. I believe he'll get more opportunities again, and maybe against St-Juste with his speed, his quick twitching abilities, he can be a mismatch there. So that's something to keep an eye on. And I really like the Bills matchup against this secondary, against this defensive backfield. At the safety positions, Derek Forrest, Cameron Curl, they are solid but unspectacular players, So this secondary, this defensive group as whole, but especially the defensive backfield, they have struggled in creating turnovers. That's even something that also Jack Del Rio has talked about, how important it is to create turnovers and how this defense has struggled doing so. This season, in 2 games, 1 interception. That's a defensive unit that has been a top 10 unit for recently. Last season, they've been a top 10 unit in points per game allowed. They've been a top 10 unit in most of the major statistics. and defensive rankings. But something that they really have struggled to do is create turnovers. And that's something that, as Bills fans, we love to hear and love to see, because we know that the Bills really struggle to win games when Josh Allen turns the ball over too much. And they have struggled to do so. So that's a good matchup for Josh Allen. That's a good matchup for our offense, our offense, and our offensive players. If Josh really isn't forced to do too much, and that passes, that's a matter of this offensive being able to continue to be balanced, just like they were against the Raiders, and continue to be able to run the ball even if Josh isn't running the ball himself. That's a big part of keeping Josh calm, keep Josh playing under the right circumstances, not putting on the Superman cape and trying to do too much, being himself. So I hope the Bills can establish this run game. They can play well against this defensive line, and they can be a balanced offense to deal with this tough defensive line, but not so opportunistic. Let me put it this way: uh, linebacker group and defensive backfield. One that struggles creating turnovers, and that goes right in on what the Bills need against this Commanders team. So on the other side of the ball, Mafia, um, this Commanders offense is an interesting group, right? I talked a lot about the defense side of the ball so far, and a lot of Jack the Real. And when we look at the coaching staff, this coaching staff is a very experienced one. Uh, Obviously, the old McDermott mentor Ron Rivera, right? The former Carolina Panthers head coach, leading the way. But Eric Bieniemy, an offensive coordinator that left Andy Reid's, he left Andy Reid's tutelage, and he left a great situation with the Kansas City Chiefs and two rings and more to join the same position, the Washington Commanders, in the sense that he wanted to prove himself, because the word that has been out there via a lot of people, even Shady McCoy, or former running back, who's a TV broadcaster now, and he was he voiced his opinion about the enemy, saying, "Look, this guy isn't really responsible for what you see from this Kansas City Chiefs offense. It's all in the read and stuff." So when people who played under him start to say those things, you start to pay attention, and there is a reason the enemy hasn't been hired as a head coach despite all his success with the Chiefs. So smart decision and aggressive decision, trying to improve his resume and get an opportunity as a head coach. And Bieniemy is out there with the Commanders, and the early results for him are great because the team is 2-0, and this offense has produced a lot. There has been a long time since the Washington Commanders could put more than 34 points on the board, and they did it in they have done it so far this year. So the enemy is working with a second year quarterback, an inexperienced one, a guy who's getting his first shot in the NFL, and the early results have been promising. So Bieniemy is proving himself a great mind, a good offensive coordinator, a guy who learned from Andy Reid, but can be his own coordinator. And maybe he can become his own head coach in the future too. If things continue as they are right now for him, he will become a head coach sooner rather than later. So this is a extremely experienced group at the coaching staff, with Jack Del Rio, with Bieniemy, with Rivera, and I already talked about the quarterback. Let me focus on him. Um, Sam Howell, that's a second-year quarterback who's playing really well. He has a good arm. He can spin it. He has some mobility. He can run the ball, sometimes scramble. So far, he has a completion percentage of 65.7%, 7.2 yards per thrown, right? 3 touchdowns, just 1 interception, but he's been sacked 10 times already in 2 games. So he's doing a great job so far in his first 2 starts this year. And he's dangerous, especially with the weapons he has at his disposal. The Washington Commanders has a really interesting group of weapons, a really interesting group of pass catchers. They have a good running back, maybe a star in the making, but the offensive line has struggled in the department of protecting Sam Howell. And if McDermott can be aggressive, if McDermott can deal up some different looks, and especially using Bernard and Milano to try to hide coverages and hide who's coming to the blitzes, and try to fool Howell early and often, I believe the Bills have a good chance of creating some turnovers and making Howell throw the second and maybe even the third pick this year. But so far, he has done a great job. And again, huge props to Eric Bieniemy, because that's the guy who's been working with Mahomes. And as I always say, Mahomes is awesome, but he's in a great situation. And those schemes are great for the quarterback. And Bieniemy is proving that again with the Commanders, making Sam Howell. Again, all respect of the world to Howell early on. He might be the real deal. But it's not easy to come in, second-year guy, first opportunity as a starter, and to have the completion percentage that he has put so far, especially with this yard per thrown average. So that's a great look for Howell, but that's awesome look for Bieniemy too. And where the Bills can explore, taking him out of rhythm, getting after him. And that's an offensive line that I believe the Bills can take advantage of, just like they did, and they dominated against in the first 2 weeks against the Jets, against the Raiders. I think our defensive line did a great job. And against those guys, they can do a great job again. Andrew Willie, a good right tackle, former Chief, but then Sam Cosmi, Nick Gates, Sadiq Charles, and Charles Leno Jr. Charles Leno Jr., former Bear, a guy who developed well. They have a good pair of tackles. They have an average interior offensive line, but they have really struggled to protect the quarterback. And I believe the Bills can take advantage of that. Greg Rousseau has played well early on. Leonard Floyd has had a great start for the Bills. And Ed Oliver is overplaying his contract. He said he would do so, and we can see it early on, especially rushing the passer. I felt like he had a little bit of trouble against the run versus the Jets, but versus the Raiders, it's far from true. They dominated. We know Daquan Jones, what he can do, how dependable he is. And I really believe that defensive line can dominate against this offensive line again, and they can contain the run maybe. I will get there, but first they can get after Sam Howell. That will be important, because it's not just Sam Howell, it's not just Bieniemy and his schemes, but it's also a great group of pass catchers. Logan Thomas, or former quarterback turned tight end, mismatch athletically speaking as a tight end. He had his first opportunity as a tight end with the Bills, but he really flourished as a tight end for the Commanders. He might be out of this game, and that's huge for the Bills, because Logan Thomas is the kind of tight end that can give problems for linebackers with his combination of size, speed. And then at wide receiver, man, this top 3 wide receiver group is really good. Terry McLaurin, maybe one of the most underrated wide receivers in the league. That's easily, in my opinion, a top 10 guy, maybe even a top 5 guy, and who has struggled during all his career thanks to not having a great quarterback throwing him the ball. Now with Howell and with Bieniemy in charge, he has more opportunities to showcase his abilities, and he has done it so far. Jahan Dotson, first round pick, extremely talented, a guy who has great hands, a guy who can separate, great guy. Curtis Samuel, former Panther, guy who can fly, guy who can be a deep threat, but also a threat receiving some screen passes, running some jet motions, and dangerous group. Pringle, former chief, Bieniemy knows how to use the guy. Jamie Brown, former third rounder, from North Carolina Tar Heel, also can fly, also can run. So they have a huge, a really good group, and a deep group. And even Jameson Crowder, our old friend from last season, but he's even an older friend for Washington because he started his career there and he's back in the fold. But I'd like really to highlight the top three. This top three is as good as you can get, man. I really like the top three targets. Bieniemy knows how to scheme people open. Those guys have the ability to separate, to run good routes, and Howell has proven that he can get the ball on their hands. So it's been interesting so far. They have a similar production, or an equal production so far, and well balanced target share between all those guys. Targets, if you see the targets so far, Dodson with 12, Thomas with 11, McLaurin 10, Curtis Samuel 8, and then Antonio Gibson, the running back 2, with 4, and Brian Robinson, running back 1, with 5. So the top 4 targets have received equal number of targets, and they have kind of equal production too. Even the touchdowns, the 3 touchdowns were scored by 3 different players. So that's a tough group to defend, man. That's a tough group to defend. The Bills will need to be on point. They will need to communicate well. They will need to identify and adjust in game, because they might have answers for this trio and for the enemy early on, but they're gonna adjust, and you gotta be ready to adjust in game. I think that's something that the Bills have struggled in the past, especially in the playoff losses. And that's something that we've seen the Bills doing this year, adjusting a little bit better. We saw a pitiful first drive against the Raiders, and then they adjusted and played really well against that offense. So I hope McDermott can find good options to deal with this group, because they are tough. They will be hard to be covered all the time. They will be hard to be covered if the quarterback has time to throw the ball. So that's why they gotta get after Howell. I honestly don't see Tre'Davious White nowadays being able to hold up on his own against Terry McLaurin all the time, cover him on one-on-one all the time, and hold his own. It's far from being a knock on White. McLaurin is that good. Okay, so the Bills don't play a lot of man coverage. They don't left their cornerbacks on island most of the time, but those matchups will be hard. Bainford will be a hard time against Dodson, against McLaurin when he's there, and even with against Samuel's speed. Same thing can be said about Tre'Davious White, and the same thing can be said about Taron Johnson inside, playing the slot wide receiver. So the Bills will need to be on point, play those covers, keep everything in front of them, tackle well. As I said before, the weather might be a factor. If it's raining and if the field is heavy, maybe the run game will be more important, both sides, both ways. So, but in the passing game, get after somehow. I think the Bills can do that. And if they can do that, they can take him out of rhythm and maybe avoid him sharing the ball and spreading the ball to all his great targets, not having Logan Thomas certainly will help the Bills a bit, but it's not going to be an easy matchup for this passing defense. The run defense will deal with up and coming um, running back as in Brian Robinson. That's a big physical guy. He doesn't have the that sixth gear, the final speed to punish you with home runs, but he's so physical. He can be a hammer, just like we talked about Latavius Murray, Damian Harris. That's a guy who can be a hammer, get those hard fought yards and move the chains. Um, the Bills will need to be aggressive. The Bills will need to be on point with their gap control and attacking those gaps and being really aggressive doing so to avoid Robinson getting in onto that second level of our defense, because Robinson can run over everybody on our secondary. He can run over Bernard. He can run over Milano. He's this kind of running back. He's a physical specimen in the size and strength department, and the Bills will need to be careful, really, really careful with how they allow him to hit his stride. So the same thing that happened to Jacobs must happen to Robinson this week. It's difficult in it's even unfair to expect or defense to hold running backs to negative yardage, but we'll need big time games from Oliver, big time games from Daquan Jones, Jordan Phillips, or rotation inside the defensive tackle to keep Bernard, to keep Milano free, so they can quickly arrive in Robinson and they can game tackle him, because on one-on-one tackles it's going to be difficult to deal with this guy. And again, in the passing game, man, the lack of speed or the supposed lack of speed, I think everybody has agreed that the Bills secondary has looked slow at times, and maybe Hyde and Poyer finally lost in step, and it's showing. Benford showed great speed running after Brees Hall in week one, but speed isn't his forte, isn't his major strength. Tre'Davious White has speed, okay. Term Johnson decent, but it's not a speedy defensive backfield. And those guys, they are targets. They have speed. McLaurin, Samuel, elite speed. Dodson has speed. Brown has speed. So they're gonna be tested. The Bills secondary will be tested speed wise. We know that in the past, Bieniemy has taken advantage of his advantage in speed. He has taken advantage of these opportunities with Tyreek Hill, with Hardman, with the weapons he had at his disposal in Kansas City. And he will test the secondary speed, no doubt about that. McLaurin and Samuel, those guys, De'Ami Brown, those guys can really fly and they can test our secondary speed. That's something that the Bills will need to be aware. And I believe our strategy in the passing game will be being patient, will be taking away the big plays, will be having everything in front of you, tackling well, being patient, trying to put Howell, Bieniemy, that offense in a bad situation, maybe needing to come from behind and needing to force more stuff, getting them out of their comfort level. If the Bills can't take the lead, if they can't open a good lead, if they keep it close, or even if the Commanders can take the lead and have the lead and play with a lead, it's going to be a really tough matchup, because they will certainly try to make Josh Allen beat them and be Superman. They will try to shut down our running game. They have the defensive line for that, and they will try to make that bad Josh Allen appear in this game, especially if it's a bad weather game. And just like I said, that's a defensive group that has been challenged to create more turnovers. So I'm pretty sure Jack Del Rio is telling his guys that that's the game where if they can stop the run, they will get opportunities at interceptions. Hopefully, the Bills can get their running game going. I'd use Murray, I'd use Harris a lot, and they can get that running game going. They can put Josh in good situations. They can avoid penalties, especially. That's going to be very important on first downs, avoiding penalties, avoiding put Josh in first and 15 situations, second and 15 situation, and so he can play without forcing stuff. I think Josh will be in position to play really well. I think he has the matchup advantage with his weapons against those members of that secondary. But the pass rush can be problematic. I hope our offensive line can hold their own, and Dorsey and Josh, they can together put up a good game plan, getting the ball out of Josh's hands quickly, punishing the defense for giving him short intermediate stuff, trying to get yardage after catch. And if they can be patient doing that, the opportunities for big plays will appear later on. But they got to establish this patient style on offense with short passes, with run game, maybe more under center and play action. I'm expecting to see a little bit more of that in this week, especially if Knox can go and you can have your two tight ends set, your 12 personnel ready for the game. And on the other side of the ball, I believe the pass rush is the key in stopping the run, obviously. I believe our defensive line is in a good position to be able to dominate that offensive line, especially against the run, and then putting them in clear passing downs. That's an offensive line that has struggled to protect Howell, so I think the opportunity will be there, and the Bills must take advantage of them to be able to make the game easier. The speed of those guys, the weapons, the speed concerns me against our secondary, but it's a good test, especially with Hyde having concerns regarding his hamstring. And I'll be honest, if Hyde can't go or if Hyde struggles with his hamstring, I wouldn't like to see Taylor Rapp out there because that's a guy who's challenged speed-wise too. I would really like to see Cam Lewis getting a shot because that's a guy who really looked great during preseason in his long game against the Bears, but he looked great during OTAs, during training camps. He looked really fast. He looked playing decisive. He was physical. He's a physical guy tackling. He flies all over the field. He had a few snaps in the last game when the Bills put the backups in the game, and he almost got an interception. Bad hands avoided him of getting an interception, but he was in a good position. He was there to make the play, and the play wouldn't even be validated, unfortunately, due to a penalty. But I'm curious. Ken Lewis is the guy who I'm really curious to see getting a real opportunity because I really believe if not for that catch by Justin Jefferson last season, all of us would have been talking better things about Cam Lewis' stretch as a starter at safety last year, 1, 2, 3 games at most. And with his offseason this year, he looked really great. I believe if he gets a real opportunity, man, he might be able to become a factor at the safety position and maybe even establish himself as a contender to getting a shot when Hyde and Poyer aren't there anymore. So that's something I will keep an eye on too. But overall, it's a tougher matchup than we give it credit for when looking at first, We look at first, okay, the Commanders have been bad for a long time now. They aren't that good. But look, this is a 2-0 team. This is a team who has been under some difficult circumstances already this season. They have adjusted. They have come back in a game that they were losing badly. And even in that situation, how he could keep his composure and lead a comeback. The enemy surely knows how to take the most of him so far. Experienced coaching staff, they will be prepared for this game. The weather might be something that will be a factor in this game. So that has all the ingredients to be a tough matchup. And the Bills are one game. They're going to play one. That's one game just before playing their divisional rival, the Miami Dolphins, in a game that's hugely important uh, for divisional wins purpose and for winning the division. So that's a game that ideally the Bills. Obviously, there aren't games that you can lose, right? But ideally, just before playing the Dolphins, in a game that the Bills probably will need to win to tie with them in the record. Ideally, the Bills don't lose this game against the Commanders, but the matchup is difficult. So I'm looking forward to this game. It's going to be an exciting one. But I don't have the confidence to tell you what I told you last week. Last week I told you something like, look, if the Bills lose to this Raiders team, not that they are bad, with all due respect, but if they lose to this Raiders team, this may become this might become a tough season. This might become to this might become the start of the end for this team as it is constructed. And obviously it didn't happen. They went there and beat the Raiders easily, playing really well, and McDermott in command, Dorsey in command, Josh Allen playing well, run game showing up, the offensive line playing better, Spencer Brown playing better, so defensive line dominating. So they played as the contenders they are. They showed who those Bills really are. They are the same team as we've seen, a team that is a contender in the AFC, a team with some question marks, but a team who's going to compete and has a shot. Well, they will have a tough matchup against the Raiders, and that's not a game that I put in the same tier as the game against the Raiders. That's going to be difficult and away from home, and I hope the Bills can turn this game into an easier one. But they have some ingredients to make this game a tough challenge. So I'm confident the Bills can win. I hope they can win. I expect them to win this game, but I don't expect it to be so easy. My predicted score, it's a matter of the weather. So, but not taking weather into the consideration, I believe the Bills can score 27, 28 points, and I expect McDermott to be able to make Howell's life difficult. So I'd bet 28-17 for this game, or 28-18 for the score for this game. If you wanna send your guess, feel free, Bismarck, or if you wanna write your guess in the comment section. If you're watching or not watching live, feel free. It's gonna be a pleasure to interact. I really appreciate you taking your time being with me this Leading the Charge today. I will be back on Sunday with the Leading the Charge in Portuguese for Brazilian Bills Mafia, Latin America, all Portuguese-speaking countries. I will be in Portuguese doing the post-game show, Leading the Charge on Sunday, hopefully with a win. If it is a win by 28-18, by 10, or if it is 28-0, or if it is 28-27, man, I will be happy the same way. But that's the way I see this matchup so far. And thanks so much for taking your time to hit that like button, to subscribe to Buffalo Rumblings channel. It's been a blast to be in the community, and I'll be back on Sunday. I really appreciate everybody who's participating in the chat. And just remembering, this episode is available via Apple Podcasts, via Spotify, and other podcast aggregators. So download the episode, rate us there, and thanks, Bills Mafia. Hopefully, we can watch a great game on Sunday, and I will be back with the post-game show in Portuguese. So that's it. Thank you so much. See you around. Go Bills.